Explain like I'm 5. Why can no rigid body exist? Why can no body be perfectly rigid? I've looked it up and can understand that no body will ever be perfectly rigid. Also that it is because information cannot travel faster than light, but still not finding a clear explanation as to why something can't be perfectly rigid. Is it because atoms don't form together rigidly, therefore making it impossible? I'm really lost on this matter. Thanks. Also don't know if this is physics or not. Edits. I might understand now. From what I understand in the comments, atoms cannot get close enough and stay close enough to become rigid, I think. Correct if wrong. I've gotten many great answers and have much more questions because I am a very curious person. With that being said, I think I understand the answer to my question now. If you would like to keep adding on to the info bank, it will not go unread. Thanks everyone. Stay curious. Materials are made of atoms. The atoms hold in place thanks to the bonds that form between them. These bonds are essentially akin to springs. No matter what you do, a material held together with springs is not going to be 100% rigid. It's not a complete explanation. But it's not just because objects can't move FTL. The forces keeping an object together are electromagnetic forces, which are mediated by electromagnetic fields, which move at the speed of light. So even without any other elasticity in the object, which there always is some, when a force is applied, it cannot keep the same shape, as the forces within each atom are themselves moving at the finite speed of light. So there will always be some time frame where the force has moved half of the atoms, but hasn't moved the other half. Assume a perfectly rigid rod. Since it is perfectly rigid, it cannot compress at all. If it cannot compress at all, then if I push at one end, the other end must move instantly. This means that's the information that I pushed on one end would reach the other end faster than the speed of light. Atom itself has lot of empty space in it. Most of the mass is concentrated in the nucleus. Electron density around the nucleus can be influenced by surrounding atoms or environment. So, there is some time gap between the application of external force and the reaction from the surrounding atoms, as they are not intact to feel it at the moment of application. A perfectly rigid body would in theory transfer force or vibration across itself instantly, faster than light. The fact is that every substance has some give in it. So from an engineering perspective this looks different. We'd assign all metal parts not to be deformed past the elastic limit, i.e. the metal changes shape under load but returns to its original shape when unloaded. With sufficient safety factor we can design components for no measurable deformation, rigid beyond our ability to detect change. I watched the Phoebe Cates bikini scene in Fast Times at Ridgemont High as a 13-year-old boy, and I beg to differ with the entire premise of the discussion. Because information can't move faster than c. Cause and effect can't move faster than c either. There is always a delay, however short, between the time you push on the back of an object and the time that the front of the object knows that the back has been pushed. During that time the object will deform, because the back side is moving but the front side does not yet have any reason to move. You would probably enjoy some quantum physics concepts. Look up the double slit experiment. You just have to find a decent explanation that explains it in terms that the average person can understand. Most of them are word soup and confusing AF. It's fascinating though. Also the concept of Schrödinger's car is also fascinating and they kind of relate to one another. Check it out. From a practical standpoint and not diving into relativity, no chemical bond is perfectly rigid. Chemical bonds are just electron interactions causing atoms and molecules to stay near each other. Because of this, no matter how strong the bond is, It'll still act kind of like a spring when you push or pull it. So when at the atomic level, you don't have a perfectly rigid structure. You also won't have a rigid structure at the macro scale. You can't send a message for a year? I've got Verizon and it takes a year for the message to send because my signal always sucks. Joke's on you. Verizon deserves to catch all the strays. Is it because atoms don't form together rigidly? I think this is an easier to understand. Eli5. Think of the atoms as hard little balls. They are connected to each other by various forces. Those forces act like little springs, meaning the distance between them can be compressed or stretched by applying an outside force. So even though they don't stretch much, the combined stretch of 10-20 atoms can total actual inches, like stretching a rubber band. So as long as those forces act like springs, nothing is rigid.